Stacey Walker. I'm the Education and Program Coordinator here at New Canaan Cares. For those of you who are not familiar with us, CARE's vision is to empower youth, strengthen families, and build community. One of the ways we do this is by offering programs like today's, looking at topics that are relevant to you, your family, and friends, but don't typically come up in everyday conversations. Mental health is a word that may stir up some uncomfortable feelings, and that is okay. Our goal is to address mental health today to lessen those uncomfortable feelings and reassure families that talking about it is healthy for everyone. We will discuss how to talk to children, family, and friends, and the importance of checking in. Oftentimes, the topics that may seem hard to talk about, once we open the door, blossom into amazing conversations. We are proud to partner with Silver Hill Hospital to have Emma Kate Friedman join us today. Emma Kate is a licensed professional counselor. She earned her undergraduate degree from Miami University, where she studied psychology and has a master's in clinical mental health counseling from Fairfield University. Emma Kate works for Silver Hill Hospital in their intensive outpatient program and is assisting with the launch of a new assessment service. She also has a small private practice. Prior to working for Silver Hill, Emma Kate worked in the New Canaan community as a teen top counselor at New Canaan High School. She specializes in working with adolescents, young adults, and their families, as well as substance abuse. So we welcome Emma Kate, and she is a familiar face to us, and we're happy to have her here today and you all.
Good morning, everybody. I see some familiar faces. I hope everyone had a good weekend. So let me see. I'm going to share my screen so I can show you guys the PowerPoint I put together. What I'm planning to do is I wanted to cover kind of quickly just a couple topics that might come up with your middle schoolers, so we can sort of do a quick 101 over some of these issues, and then jump into some communication skills and strategies. And Stacey, we're saving time at the end for questions, or can people ask questions as we go?
I think, whatever you're comfortable with. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do that housekeeping. You are free to put any questions in the chat. And if Emma Kate is talking about something and you have a question at that time, I will share the questions with her, and we will also have time for Q&A at the end.
Perfect. All right, let me go into slideshow mode. Here we go. Okay. All right. So like Stacey said, my name is Emma Kate Friedman. I work at Silver Hill Hospital. I do mostly work with young adults, adolescents, and their families, especially in my private practice. So this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. I'd like to think I know a lot about this topic, and I welcome your questions and any feedback and ideas you might have too. So some of the things I wanted us to cover, especially as they come up with our middle school kids, some of our mental health concerns, what does mental wellness look like, substance use, social issues, academic pressures, and not just how do I talk to my kids about this, but how do I, encourage them to talk to me about these things too. So let me jump in quickly to mental health. So and some of this I know that a lot of people in this room might have heard before. So let me know if I'm going too quickly or if there's anything that you'd like me to go into a little bit more detail on. I just want to make sure that I allow enough time for us to talk about communication and allow for some question and answer. But let me know if you need me to stop and give more detail. But I think what's helpful to keep in mind for kids at this age and stage is where they are developmentally, right? So at this point, their brains are not fully developed, right? Their frontal lobe is not fully formed yet, meaning the part of their brain that is helping with decision-making, risk analysis, impulse control, emotional regulation, and they're also feeling their feelings much more intensely than they have before, right? We have puberty going on in the background, so that's always helpful. And developmentally, in terms of their own what we would call like a developmental crisis, this is when we're looking at identity versus role confusion, meaning who am I in the world? Who am I, individualized of my parents, right? What are some of the things that I really care about? What makes me me? So middle school and high school is when our kids are really starting to explore that part of themselves and trying on different hats to see what really feels like them. So this might be when we're seeing that if they are a child who has historically gone to Sunday school, for example, or been involved in a youth group. As we're in middle school or high school, they might pull away from that a little bit, right? And that's actually probably developmentally appropriate, right? They're maybe trying on a different hat, seeing if religion or the religion they were raised with is something, that feels right for them, right? Or we might find that some of the friends that they had in elementary school, they're not spending so much time with in middle school, right? They're trying out different friend groups, different interests, that sort of thing. So I think it's good to keep in mind that, at this age and stage, a lot of the things that are going on that we might see as risky or even fall under that umbrella as bad behavior, we can actually frame as developmentally appropriate, right? It doesn't in any way, shape, or form give them a free pass to do any of these things, but it means that we can at least anticipate that some of these things might happen and have a response kind of ready to go. So it's a good opportunity, right? At this point, what I tend to hear about a lot, especially in middle school from parents and kids, are concerns around anxiety and depression in particular. I think depression is one where there seems to be a little bit more widely known about it. Anxiety is where I tend to see a little bit of confusion, right? Especially between anxiety and stress, for example. What's the difference? So stress and anxiety are absolutely related, but they are quite different, right? One is a mental health issue and one is not. Anxiety tends to be something where kids are having an outsized reaction to a trigger or to a stressor. Stress tends to be when you have something that needs to be done and maybe not all the resources to have it done in a timely fashion, or feeling like I'm going to really struggle with this task, right? So stress makes sense for situations like kids going into a test, right? It makes sense that a test would be stressful. But when the test is over, the stress level probably goes down, right? Anxiety, on the other hand, that same stress level would stick around, right? Regardless of what's going on. It likely doesn't match the situation. There's also usually some sort of somatic response, especially in middle school. You might be hearing about stomach aches, headaches, things like that. So if there's stomach aches, headaches happening, in anticipation of going to school, or when there's a lot of homework, or when there's a test coming up, it might be worth exploring with your child a little bit. With any mental health issue, it's important to note, okay, are my kids, or is my kid having a big change in their sleep cycle, right? Has their mood been really, really different? And it's not just, once a week. This is about 2 weeks or so of, wow, their mood seems really low, or they seem really stressed out, really anxious. Any changes in eating hygiene, spending time with friends, and like we said, their interests might change in this stage, right? It's if they're not interested in anything, or if they're not motivated to do anything, or if they're suddenly not interested in something that they used to really, really care about, right? And your kids, so if this is a difference between, they're trying out different activities and see how they like it versus they're not interested in anything, or they're so preoccupied with the anxiety that they can't enjoy their activities anymore. Any talk that you notice about, I just wish I could die, or I'm so overwhelmed, I just want to kill myself, or, I want to fall asleep and not wake up. I tend to talk to parents a lot about those statements because A, they can feel really scary, and B, it can feel like, what do I even do with that? If I talk to them about that, am I going to be indulging those thoughts? Am I going to make it worse by talking to them about it? And the short answer is no. Right? Talking to your kids about suicide or suicidal thoughts, or welcoming a conversation about it, is not going to plant an idea in their head, right? It's actually going to do the opposite, right? It's going to let them know that you're informed on the topic, that they can come to you if they ever have concerns about themselves or about a friend. And it's going to make it very clear that you're aware of what's going on and that you can be a resource to them. So in terms of mental health, the action that we want to take as parents is, emphasizing wellness, self-care, validating, and being supportive, right? We want to try to have as many open, collaborative conversations around mental health as we can. It's also helpful to know what your local resources are, so that if you're feeling like you need some extra support on talking with your kids about mental health, or if you're not really comfortable talking about suicide, the best defense there is to at least feel knowledgeable on the topic, right? Okay. And I know I'm flying through these, so please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, substance use and other risky behaviors. at the risk of sounding patronizing, yes, we're talking about substance use in middle school, right? High school is too late to start talking about substance use. You know, we know, especially with vaping having such a big boom the last couple of years, we know that kids are abusing substances earlier. And the earlier kids use a substance, the more likely they are to become addicted to any substance later in life. So this is a really important time in terms of brain development, and that brain development can be disrupted by substance use. So again, remember where they are with everything going on up here. So with substance use, what we'd like to do is very similar to our mental health conversation, right? Try talking with your kids early and often about substance use, about what some of the risks are, but also wondering to them, what do you know about this substance? Or I heard something about a jewel, like, can you tell me what that is? Right? This isn't the situation where we want to pretend to know everything or have all the answers. And it's okay if we fiend learning from them because it lets us know what they already know. So asking your kids about what have you heard about a jewel, or have you ever been to a party where there was alcohol there? Like, was that uncomfortable for you? You know, what would you like to do if that situation comes up? And also, again, early and often letting them know what your expectations of them are and what your household rules are, right? So if they know early on that your house is not the house where they can have friends over and drink beer in the basement, it won't be a surprise in high school, right? Like middle school, I like to frame as an opportunity to kind of lay this groundwork so that we can avoid some issues in high school. What else did I want to check? Oh, like I said, the earlier kids use substances, the more likely they are to become addicted to something later. There's no such thing as having safe substance use when kids are this young, right? So the messaging around, well, if they're drinking just at home with family, isn't that safer than them going to a party? Sure, but why are we giving them the option to use a substance at all, especially at this point, right? You know, learning their limits now, again, is something that doesn't really apply. If anything, it's helping them build a tolerance, which again, behooves us to addiction and addictive behaviors. And being the house where kids can come to drink, I'm yet to see it work out well, I'll put it that way. Working in a high school and working with adolescents and young adults who are in recovery from substances, the age I hear most frequently is 12 for age of first use, right? So those of you who are here and have 9, 10, 11-year-old children, what a great time to start having these conversations, right? And start to lay that groundwork for prevention. So again, our action is to talk to our kids early and often about substances, let them know what your rules and expectations are, and what are we going to do if you're ever in an uncomfortable situation or if you or a friend need help with a substance. Social issues. Oh, middle school, such a great time socially. So like I said before, you know, this is a time where we're probably going to see a lot of changes in friends. And again, that is likely developmentally appropriate to an extent, right? If we're having lots of fights with friends, if we're having trouble making or keeping friends, that's a little bit different than sort of changing friend groups. It is pretty normal for friends to fight, for gossiping to happen, for kids to feel like I can't be friends with this person anymore, have really strong feelings about somebody, and then the next day be totally fine and be friends with them again. It's just, again, that really strong emotion feeling, judgment's not there, part kicking in. What we really want to pay attention to is the social anxiety piece, and again, trouble making and keeping friends. You know, social skills in middle school and high school are really put to the test, and it might be a point where our kids don't feel really confident, right? And there's we could have a whole other separate conversation about the role of social media in that. But the good news is there's lots of social skills resources available. So if you or your kid ever suspect that they might need to kind of flex that muscle a little bit more and improve their social skills, this is a great time to do it. Especially with, you know, we have school sports, we have club sports, other clubs around school interests. There's lots of ways for them to try on those different hats and figure out what social group feels good for me, what am I passionate about, so they can explore things other than academics. So again, we're validating, we're offering support when needed, and we're also letting kids navigate their own social lives. This is the part where we're a little bit more hands off, right? I do think it's a great idea to know your kids' friends' parents. You will not know all of them. Their friends change daily. You're going to hear a friend's name one day that's their best friend and have never heard their name before. It's okay if you don't know all of your kids, friends' parents, but it is helpful to know some of them, especially as we're navigating through middle school and high school. But it doesn't mean that there needs to be a whole lot going on behind the scenes anymore, because this is where it's really helpful for kids to learn the natural consequences of their social behaviors. And again, encouraging them to come to you if they need some support or help in that area. Okay, academics. So the academic conversation is a little bit different for middle schoolers versus high schoolers, and that being said, middle schoolers are still talking about a lot of the same sort of long-term academic goals that high schoolers are talking about. They're already talking about college, especially if kids are looking at boarding schools. It feels like a lot of all or nothing around their grades, right? I have to get A's and B's or else I'm not going to be able to do A, B, C, D. And some of that may be true to an extent, but often it's very exaggerated. So the earlier we can catch that and just point out the gray area to kids, the better. What we don't want to do is invalidate, right? So if you have a child who really holds their standards for themselves academically very high and they get a grade that they're not happy with, right? There's a way to validate your child and reflect to them, oh, I see you're really disappointed. I'm so sorry about that, without indulging that thought of, a B isn't acceptable, right? Because we know that it is, but in the moment for them, it doesn't feel like that. So finding that line with your child between what's helpful for them when they're not feeling great with school versus what's creating some more stress or more anxiety or more pressure. And that's a conversation that I would encourage you to have with your school counselor as well. I would really, really encourage you to use them as a resource, especially in middle school and high school as the stakes get higher and as the academic pressures build. It can be really helpful in helping establish boundaries so that you're not playing both a teacher role and a tutor role and a school counselor role and a parent role, right? At this point, we just want you to be able to be present for your kids as a parent. Right. So lean on the school and lean on your school counselor if you have concerns that your child may need more resources, is falling behind, are they in the right classes, that sort of thing. Then that way home can just be about home and your connection. Let me see. Where'd I go? There we go. Okay. So this is what we're going to try to avoid. And in middle school, what we might see is instead of the kids covering their ears, they might stand up and yell back. So we're going to try to avoid this. But before I jump into communication, were there any questions around any of these topics that you wanted me to provide more detail on?
Kate, there's a question here. What if your child does not want to communicate with you or perhaps doesn't know how, and you really want to talk to them, you want to open the conversation, but they are closed and they just are not budging? What can parents do? Do you have tips for them?
I do. Great question. Okay, so yes, let's jump into some communication, skills and styles. So just full transparency, I have some bigger picture things, and then I have a couple skills for us to go through too. So especially if a child is maybe a little shut down, or if you're finding that you're getting some resistance from them to open up or have an open conversation with you, this might be a situation where you need to model the communication that you're looking for, right? And it also might take a while. Right? Any new behavior, any new communication style, it's not going to gel overnight, right? So this might be something like, when you're picking your kid up from school or from sports practice or from a friend's house or from tutoring, and you have that kind of 10 minutes to yourself in the car, talking a little bit about what your day looked like. Work was kind of stressful today. I'm really looking forward to going home and, having some time with you guys and having dinner. And I think I want to do something relaxing tonight, right? It might sound like you're just rambling, but it's modeling to your child. It sounds like you might be looking for from them in terms of, I want you to report to me what your day was like, right? Without me having to ask you and without it feeling like I'm pulling teeth. And eventually, once you've set the stage and given permission to volunteer information, to be vulnerable and to ask for help and support, it will likely happen, right? And it might need to be as concrete as you saying, you know, I hope you know that if there's something on your mind, you know, I'm happy to talk to you about it, and we don't have to solve the problem. We can just talk about it, right? That's another concern I hear from my kids a lot, actually, is when I go to my parent about something, I feel like they try to problem solve. They want to fix the problem when I just want to talk about it for now. And as parents, that can be really frustrating because it feels like, well, if you're coming to me with this problem, it must be because you want to solve this, right? And what I can do as a rational, you know, adult is help you with these things. But sometimes that's not what they want. They just want to be validated. I hope that helps answer the question. But around communication with our kids, not just about the issues that I touched on, but communication in general. If you're noticing that, you know, the communication with your child isn't where you'd like it to be, or you'd like more open communication, you'd like more collaboration, it can be really helpful just to give yourself some time and space to sit down and think about, okay, what would that improved communication look like, right? How would I know when the communication is improved? What's getting in the way of the communication that I'd like to have with my child? Is it something I'm doing? Is it something they're doing? Am I hesitant to bring up a topic because I'm uncomfortable with it? And also, is there some sort of worry or stress that's driving that need for improved communication? So do you have concerns about your child that you'd like to bring up to them, but you're not sure how, right? Are there things that we can kind of take control of before we try to tweak our communication style? That might help you form some goals around, okay, what do I really want to focus on, and make improved communication not feel like we're pushing, you know, a boulder up a mountain. We're just looking at a couple little things to improve upon. A couple things that I like to tell parents to keep in mind, right? Have a conversation, not a confrontation. So if there's something uncomfortable or unpleasant going on that you feel like you need to bring up to your child, but you're in emotion mind, right? If you're feeling activated and you're not having, you know, the calmest thoughts, it's probably not the best time to bring it up if you can avoid it. Obviously, there are exceptions, especially in terms of safety. But if you have the opportunity to take 5 minutes to take care of yourself and do what you need to do to be able to bring it down a little bit, the conversation's likely going to go better, right? What's the rush to have this uncomfortable conversation, right? Take care of yourself first. The conversation's more likely to go better and not be a confrontation if it doesn't need to be, right? When all else fails, validate, right? And collaborate. Especially with middle school and high school, when they're working toward, again, remember that developmental stage, they're working toward adulthood, independence, individuation. Who am I in the world? What matters to me? That independence piece is something we can really hone in on and almost take advantage of, right? They want to have more collaborative conversations in which they feel like they're being respected. So a conversation around curfew, for example, might look a little bit different with a 13-year-old than it does a 10-year-old, right? A 10-year-old might be more likely to understand that, okay, I need to be home from my friend's house at, I'm making up a time, 9:30. The 13-year-old might push back on that a little bit. Being able to come into that conversation collaboratively, know where you're willing to be flexible, and invite your kid to help you make the decision will likely yield a more positive and pleasant result. Just move this. Okay, and like I said, it likely will not happen overnight, right? The consistency is the key. It's also okay to own up to your child and let them know, you know, I feel like we don't talk as much as we used to. And I understand that that's going to happen, right? You have your own activities and friends and commitments, and I know it's not about me, but I really want to make sure that we're spending some time together, and we have that space to have conversations and for me to support you if you need it. So let me know, right? What would be helpful with that? Like what would help me be more supportive to you? Is there a good time to try to have this talk? Like, and again, with collaboration, include your kids in this. We don't have to keep it a secret that we're trying to have them talk to us more. So at Silver Hill, most of the clinicians are trained in DBT. DBT stands for dialectical behavioral therapy. It's a really effective intervention. And there's 4 tenets, and one of them is interpersonal effectiveness skills. It's a therapy that really focuses on skill building. So I wanted to share some of these communication skills in case they're helpful. They're all acronyms, which I find helpful. And I'll try to keep on the slides if you want to write down what each of these acronyms stand for, you can. And then Stacy, this will be available later, right?
Yes, we will put it on our.
Okay. So Dear Man is actually a really popular skill. I wouldn't be surprised if you've heard about it. The way it's often marketed is, how to ask for things and get what you want, right? I find Dear Man really effective to use with my parents and teenagers because it helps achieve just what I was talking about on the previous slide in terms of having sort of a collaborative conversation as opposed to trying to dictate, because we know that at this age and stage, that it goes in one ear and out the other, or they're going to have sort of an oppositional response to it. So Dear Man, D for describe, D for describe, E for express, A for assert, R for reinforce and reward, M for staying mindful, A for appearing confident, and N for negotiate, right? So when we're coming into a situation in which we need to ask our child to do something or say no to something, these are things to keep in mind. So I'd love to have an example of something that you might need to bring up to your child or something that you might need to say no to them on. Does anybody have anything quickly, or I'll just dig into the archives?
Yeah, I have something about stopping texting with your friends at 8 o'clock and plugging in your device and that's it for the night.
Right. Very good. So boundaries. Oh, and you reminded me I didn't touch on social media with the social issues, and I'm sorry. Thank you. So, right. So we're in a situation where our kids are on phones really late. They're maybe not being respectful of boundaries. Maybe they're texting at the dinner table, or they're texting instead of doing work. They're not plugging their phone in at the agreed upon time. So excellent example. So Dear Man is a skill we might be able to use in this situation. So D for describe the current situation, right? So this is where the parent might outline, I'm noticing that, we agreed upon you plugging in your phone. I think you said at 8 o'clock, but I've noticed that the last couple of weeks, you're still on it. The phone hasn't been plugged in. You're still really talking to your friends till closer to 9. And that's, that's not what we agreed on as a household, right? So just sort of outlining the situation, trying to do it as non-judgmentally as possible. You are the parent and you have authority. So absolutely, we can still express that and remind them of the rules of the household and what the consequences to those rules are without it being put your phone away, because it's not going to happen, right? So we've described the situation. Express your feelings and opinions about the situation. So this is where we're using I statements and maybe saying things like, I feel frustrated when I see that you are still on your phone at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, because it is a rule that everyone has their phone away at 8. It's frustrating. I actually feel a little disrespected. And then in terms of opinions, you might be able to point out something like, I've also noticed that when you're on your phone that late, you're not getting your work done, and then you're staying up late and you seem stressed, right? So the assert yourself is where we're really clearly stating what it is you want. Why did you bring this up, right? So the assert here might be, I really need you to plug your phone in at 8, right? It's something that we've talked about as a family and something that we agreed on. I really need you to plug in your phone at 8 o'clock and be respectful of that rule, right? The R, reinforce reward. It can sound like bribery. It's really not meant to. It is meant to help provide an incentive for the other person to agree to what it is you're asking, right? So keep in mind, Dear Man was not necessarily created with kids and parents in mind. It was really meant sort of as an overall how to ask for something that you need from someone. And more often than not, you're more likely to get a yes if the person on the receiving end feels incentivized to say yes, right? So the reinforced reward here might be, I really think that if you plug in your phone at 8 and turn off, you're going to get your work done faster, and you're going to be able to go to bed earlier. And you know, everything will still be there for you in the morning, and you won't get involved in the drama that comes up after 8:30, because that happens. So giving them some sort of incentive, like, this is a good idea, right? It does not have to be something like, if you plug your phone in at 8, I'll increase your allowance, or I'll do X, Y, Z, right? It doesn't need to be that, especially if it's a household rule that's already been established. Okay, so the M for stay mindful, right? So after you've made your ask and after you've reinforced a little bit, this is where some of the conversation negotiation starts to come in. So you've said your piece, you've described the situation, you've expressed your feelings, you've asserted yourself, you've offered some reinforcement. This is where your child's likely going to come back with, but that doesn't work, or, well, why do I want to do that? Or, well, this is the only time I have to talk with my friends. You'll get all the reasons, right? It's important, and I'll get to this, right, to use give and fast skills, right? I'll touch on that. But at this point, the most important thing is just to try to stay mindful of the goal, right? So if the goal is for your child to plug their phone in at 8, or plug it in earlier if we're not married to 8 o'clock, that's what we want to stay mindful of, and maybe even keep repeating, right? So if your child is bringing up, well, I'm staying up late and on my phone because that's the time that I have with my friends, right? It's important to me to be able to talk to my friends because I'm not seeing them at school, especially with everything going on with COVID, right? So what you can continue to sort of verbalize is, I know, but I really feel like you need to have your phone plugged in earlier, and appearing effective, competent, confident. So we're not apologizing, we're not using a low tone of voice or sort of shrinking away, right? This is, even if you need to fake it till you make it and just appear confident, competent, even if you aren't, that is okay. We're modeling confident, competent behavior for our kids. And when you're asking for something that you have every right to ask for, why wouldn't you be confident and competent in that ask, right? And then negotiating. So this is the toughie, right? Being willing to give to get. So let's say in this situation, as you and your child are talking about this sort of 8 o'clock time, you're hearing actually some valid reasons why 8 o'clock is tough, right? Well, most of my friends get home from practice at 7:30. And by the time they eat dinner and finish their homework, we're not really able to talk till like 8 or 8:30. Okay, well, what if you can plug in your phone at 8:30 instead of 8, but I want to see that you have your homework done before then, right? Or, okay, how about Friday? We can scoot things a little bit later, but during the week, just for now, let's really try to stick to 8. And I'm going to help you do that, right? Not in a way where I'm hovering over you and counting down the minutes till 8 o'clock, but I'm going to remind you maybe when we get closer to 7:30, so it doesn't feel like such a hard stop when I'm coming to remind you to take the phone at 8, right? This is where we can practice being collaborative, being supportive, helping our kids problem solve on their own, while also lending that support. So the negotiation doesn't need to be rolling over. It doesn't need to be giving in to what our kids want or what they're asking for, because they need to know their boundaries and the consistency and the rules of the house, right? But it's also an age and stage where those rules might not apply, right? The time that a kid hands over their phone to you at night is probably going to be different between age 10 and age 14, right? Or even 14 and 17. So it is good to help renegotiate some of these boundaries and keep it collaborative. So that was a quick and easy Dear Man. Thank you, Kate, for that example. So when we're using Dear Man, right, which again is something that we use to try to either ask for something that we want or say no to something that someone else wants, it's helpful to keep give and fast in mind. So if you ever want to do your own research on this later, if you just Google Dear Man Give Fast, you'll get a lot of information. There's videos, there's worksheets. It's great skills to keep in mind. And some of them do sound a little obvious, which is good, right? That means that we're not reinventing the wheel here. But it means that there's probably little things that we can do to kind of tweak what we're already doing, right? So when we're talking to our kids in communication in general, give and fast are really helpful to keep in mind, especially if you're using a Dear Man skill. So when we're talking to our kids, maybe keep an uncomfortable topic in mind. We're being gentle with them, right? We're not using judging language. We're not threatening. We're not sneering at them, making fun of them. We're being gentle with them because they are still their kids, even if they don't always act like it or they don't want us to think they are. The I, forgive, interested, act interested and engaged. Even if they're talking about something that you could not care less about, we're going to pretend to be engaged, because if we look interested and engaged, they're more likely to keep talking to us. Validate. I'll cover validation a little bit more, but in these conversations, we want to make sure that we're validating our children's experience. We don't have to agree with it, but we can validate it, right? An easy manner, very similar to having being gentle in an easy manner, right? This is where we're not being very reactive. If our kids are up here, we try to stay down here, right? That's one of the best things I learned in grad school very early on when I was starting out as an intern. One of my supervisors said, we don't need to match our client's level of distress in order for them to feel validated. If anything, we actually want to appear calmer, right? Less activated than the client. Because if we're both up here, we're not really problem solving very well. But if one of us can appear calm, grounded, be the rock, we're more likely to get more good things done. And that applies to parenting too. Okay, so give and fast. Be fair to yourself and to the other person. So if you're noticing that, a household rule that you have maybe isn't applying anymore, or it's not taking into account something like the restrictions with COVID, right? A lot of us have had to be really flexible with rules around phones, seeing friends, computer time, video games, that sort of thing. That's probably a lot of, practicing flexibility and being fair because the situation calls for it. No apologies, right? Don't apologize if it's not necessary. Sort of in the same wheelhouse as appearing confident, right? We can validate, we can empathize. We certainly apologize if you've done something that's hurt your child's feelings, but you don't need to apologize for asking for something that feels important and valid, right? Sticking to values. This might also be helpful in terms of pointing out your child's values too. So if they're asking to do something that doesn't really line up with the values and beliefs you hold as a family, or things that are important to your child, point that out. And being truthful, right? At this age and stage, they can sniff out a lie or any sort of not whole truth pretty easily. So by truthful, I do mean, yes, tell the truth as appropriate, but also being truthful in your intentions, right? So Kate, I'm going to use your example again. Letting them know why you're bringing up this concern about the phone not being plugged in, right? It's not because I'm trying to be a heavy, or because I'm so preoccupied with the rules that this is all I have time for, right? It's I'm worried about you not getting enough sleep, or you're spending a lot of time on your phone. Like, that's not good for your eyes, right? Just being truthful in our intentions. So dear man, give fast. Validation. This word, maybe I'm biased because of the field I'm in, but I feel like validation sort of gets thrown around a lot. I'd like to just quickly cover what it is and what it is not, especially as it comes to communicating with your adolescents, right? So validation is showing that you understand, right? Appreciating your child's point of view and their experiences. It doesn't mean that you need to try to remember back to what it was like in middle school, because our middle school experiences are likely pretty different than our own kids' middle school experiences. But you can probably empathize with that feeling of, these feelings feel so much bigger than they used to, right? Or I'm feeling really rejected by my friends, or I'm feeling, like I don't have the freedom to do what I want to do. Paying attention, looking interested, appearing interested, right? And avoiding multitasking during a conversation. Letting your kid know that they have your full attention is very validating, right? And reflecting back. Reflecting doesn't have to be the same thing as parroting, right? P-A-R-R-O-T. Reflecting can be just stating the obvious, right? Like, wow, I'm hearing you're really stressed out, or wow, that must have been really hard. I'm hearing that you feel, or if you're bringing something up like it's your kid's night to do the dishes and they haven't done it yet, right? I'm seeing that you're busy with your work, but I also know that it's your turn to do the dishes. What do we need to do here, right? Reflecting is a really great way to show that you understand, that you're listening, that you're being perceptive. Being sensitive to what's not being said. So your child, your child's experiences, what sort of history they have that might inform the way that they see the world, the way that they respond to certain events, right? So keeping that in mind and knowing that if they're having an outsized reaction to something, it could be because of a previous experience or a previous trauma, also helpful to keep in mind. Understanding, acknowledging that what they're thinking, feeling, doing is the best that they can probably do in that situation with the skills that they have. So again, keeping in mind where they are developmentally and how they're really sort of limited right now in the way that they can process things, access coping skills, regulate their emotions, right? We can't expect them to do adult level things yet. They literally do not have the brain capacity to do that. And just showing respect, right? Validation is not blindly agreeing with your child, right? It's not compromising your role as a parent. And it's not avoiding natural consequences, right? So we can validate, we can appreciate our children's feelings and their experiences, and that there's something that they're bringing up to us, for example, is very important to them. But you can validate without agreeing, right? So that might look like, you know, I'm hearing you that you're really bummed out that you're not getting to spend a whole lot of time with your friends. I know this has been a really hard time for everybody, and I hear you, and I so appreciate you letting me know that. Now I have that insight. At the same time, I can't let you stay out until midnight, right? Because it's not safe right now, or, you know, with COVID restrictions, like, I'm not comfortable with you being in a big group of friends right now. And I hear you that you're missing out and that you miss your friends, right? So what do we need to do to try to meet in the middle somewhere, right? Lots of meeting in the middle school and high school. Right? So validating doesn't have to mean that you're compromising your role as a parent, right? We don't need to take the path of least resistance, right? Because then we're setting ourselves up for more conflict. And avoiding natural consequences is also not the same as validating, right? So if our child breaks a household rule, and we give them a little bit of leeway the first time, but then it keeps happening. If we're just avoiding what we said the agreed upon consequence of that action was, we're just enabling the behavior. I know I'm not supposed to say enable, but it's the first word that came to mind. If they're not having a natural consequence for the action, they're not learning, and the action's going to be repeated. Right? Same thing with academic stuff. If they're repeatedly not getting their work done and you're coming to the rescue and, you know, emailing their teachers, you know, asking for extensions for them, that sort of thing, what they're taking away from that, whether they realize it or not, is, if I don't get my work done, it's okay. My mom will take care of it, or my dad will take care of it, or, you know, something will happen, right? Middle school, great opportunity for kids to experience natural consequences. Let's have them experience these things now before they get to high school, and it's a little higher stakes, right? And I tend to have the same conversation with my high school parents around, look, the stakes in high school are different than the stakes in college, right? If they're going to fail a class, if they're going to fail a test, if they're going to not have a project in on time, what a great time for them to experience it now, when the stakes are low and they're home and they have support from you and their friends and lots of academic support, then not experience it until college because you're not there to fix it for them, right? So it's honestly kind of a gift to let them have this time to make mistakes and have to problem solve. And guess who they're going to problem solve with? You. We all win. Okay, so I want to be mindful of the time. Do we have enough time for questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. Sorry. Excuse me. Yes. So piggybacking on communication and validation and bringing in some boundaries, and you did mention COVID. So obviously now families have different rules within their own household with regard to COVID. It may be, well, at home we wear masks. Well, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, caretaker, my friends don't wear masks. Or my friends go out with their friends. Why doesn't our family go out with friends? How, as we as parents, talk to our children about boundaries during this COVID time to help them understand the rules in our house may not be the same as someone else's.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think COVID in some ways has amplified those conversations. And then in other ways, it is sort of typical because this is a big social learning stage. So this is when kids are noticing differences between how they're parented and how their friends are parented, or what their friends are allowed to do and what they're allowed. So this conversation, I think, will continue post-COVID. There's always going to be something that a friend's parent's doing better than you, apparently, right? So I think it's a good opportunity to sort of reflect back what your child's asking. And instead of trying to have all the answers or be put in a position where you're sort of made to be defensive, wonder back to them like, oh, what made you notice that? Or what is it about what they're doing differently that's more appealing to you, right? Or tell me a little bit more about why you brought that up. Kind of put the onus on them a little bit. That'll help you get a little bit more information from them on why they brought it up, right? What's the why behind the point that they made? So it might be, well, Joey's friends are able to, I don't know, Joey's family goes out to eat, right? And we haven't gone out to eat in months because it doesn't feel safe for us yet. So, okay, Joey and his family go out to eat. What made you bring that up? What is it about that feels better for you? Well, we're spending a lot of time at home, right? Or I just want to get out of the house, or it feels like they're doing something special and we're not, right? That gives us a little bit more information, right? The reason behind the ask might be where we want to dig into more than sort of the accusation or the but this is different. Does that help answer the question?
I think so. And then Emma-Kate, with that, can you tie into and circle back to how that might affect the mental health of children?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, oh gosh, that could be a whole other conversation, right? But in terms of COVID and how it may or may not be affecting our children's mental health, we know that it likely is, right? And full disclosure, I'm talking a little bit about correlation more than causation, but in these last 8 months since lockdown started, there has been an increase, right, in emergency room visits for children 10 and up, right? There was something like oh gosh, I get my numbers wrong. I think it was 25% increase for kids between 10 and 14 and 30% between 15 and 18. So we are seeing an increase in sort of mental health crises. It's tough not to make that correlation with COVID because that's the biggest thing that's been going on. I think in terms of what long-term consequences there might be, it sort of depends on what sort of prevention we do now and how we sort of answer this issue now. And what I've been encouraging kids and families to do, which might sound a little backwards, is let's not think too far ahead, right? Let's not be too future thinking, because what we need to do today is sort of get through the here and now and focus on the here and now and what we can control today, what we can control for the next couple days, what we can control for the next couple weeks, right? We don't know really when the way of the world right now is going to end and when things are going to go back to, our old normal. We don't know that. And that can be really anxiety provoking. But what do I know about today, right? I know that I have classes until 2. And I know that my homework's probably going to take me a couple of hours. I know when my friends are free for FaceTime or to go on a distanced outdoor walk, that sort of thing. That can really help bring anxiety down and better enable kids and parents to access coping skills, right? If we're thinking 3 months down the road, we've lost it. We're not grounded anymore, right? But if we can practice skills that help keep us grounded to the here and now and focus on things one step at a time, it helps improve that resiliency a little bit and that resourcing a little bit. Does that make sense? I think that would be that's the one big suggestion I've been giving a lot is let's just one thing at a time. It's also very normal, very, very normal right now if you're experiencing increased conflict at home, right? If there's more arguing, nitpicking, fighting going on than normal, or than what's typical for your family, even with school being in session, it's still a lot of time at home for those of us who are working from home or who are furloughed or who lost our jobs and kids are doing hybrid learning or they're all online. It's a lot of time at home. It's a lot of togetherness, which has its positives and not so positive pieces, right? So it's okay. Your family's not doing anything wrong if you're noticing that there's some more fighting going on. What might be helpful is just noticing, okay, the fighting, the arguing, is it feeling more personal? Is it feeling like it's lingering? Is it something that we're not able to kind of make a joke about later? Is it getting physical? Are there threats involved? Are we using really ugly language with each other? If it's things that aren't really feeling like you or aren't aligning with your values or you have some concerns, now, again, what an opportunity to reach out, right? And get some additional support from a marriage and family therapist, from your school counselor, school social worker, teen talk counselor. There's lots of resources available. And this issue is not anything new or uncommon.
I have another question, and this is just regards, so I have twin daughters who are about to turn 11, and the one, it was very interesting what you had to say about, you know, sort of drawing her out a little bit about engaging with friends. The other is sort of starting to wonder about sexuality and gender identity. And she has a friend who's not sure how she feels about herself. And so she has a lot of questions. And I'm just wondering how to sort of support her curiosity. She goes to a Catholic school. So I've also said, look, I don't think this is something you should talk to with your Catholic school friends, because, you know, generally this is something parents want to be able to discuss with their children. And so I don't know how to, I really don't know how to deal with, yeah.
And 11, I mean, that's right on time, right? This is when kids start to notice who they're attracted to, have these sort of feelings. And again, if she has a friend who's expressing, you know, some questioning or wondering who she's attracted to, what her sexuality might be, it makes sense that she would have questions, right? I think the most important thing we can do with any issues around sexuality, healthy relationships, even friendships, is just try to present ourselves as best we can as a non-judgmental resource, right? So I might not have all of the answers about this for you, but I'll help. Let's like look together to find them, and I'll be a soundboard for you, and I'll help validate if this is a time that's confusing for you, or if you have a friend who has come out and you want to be supportive of them and you're not sure how to do that. You know, basically presenting yourself as, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but I do want to be here for you and be supportive, and we can find the answers together, right? In terms of for anyone else who's interested, LGBTQ plus resources, the Triangle Community Center in Norwalk is an excellent resource. If you Google TCC Norwalk, they have excellent resources for kids, for families, for partners, everything from education to advocacy. And if they don't have the resource, they'll point you to somebody who does. So they're great, right? In terms of coaching her through, you know, talking to friends about this issue or talking to administrators, I think if it were me, I would probably emphasize that a little less and emphasize coming to you and you being supportive more, right? Then that way you're sending a message that, you know, you are validating of her experience, no matter what that might be, that you're there to be a resource and answer questions for her, and highlighting that as opposed to the focus on people who may not be so validating, right? Yeah. So especially this early kind of tender stage, we don't want any shame around it, right? So if she feels like she can come to you and talk to you about it, great.
Yeah. Okay, terrific.
Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And I have one other question. How do you deal with lying at this stage?
Ooh. They think they're good at it at this age. So depending, right, I'll be very general, right? So depending on what the lie is about, what the situation is, you know, we want to be really mindful to match our reaction with, you know, the stressor, or with the lie, or with the trigger, right? So if they've lied about something small, a little more benign, something a little more non-consequential, which is preferred, right? Then it's a little easier to call it out and just say, hey, I don't know if you, I noticed you lied about this. And just calling it out, you can make a joke of it if it's appropriate, right? We can be non-judgmental. We can also ask, you know, where did the need to lie come from? Like, were they, and you might get a number of reasons for that, right? They might have thought that they were going to get in trouble. They thought that you weren't going to appreciate it. They didn't think it was a big deal. You know, making sure that you've caught them and you know it, and we're not sweeping it under the rug. And making sure that even in that moment, they still feel safe coming to you is ideal, right? Obviously, there are situations in which we can't do that. That would be great if it always worked out like that. But if a bigger lie comes up, or if there's something having to do with safety, or maybe something like substance abuse, and it's something where, you know, we can't really joke about it, or we need to make sure that it's taken very seriously, treat it as such, and just try to be mindful of using those validation and those collaborative skills, right? So we can still practice natural consequences, practice boundaries, you know, remind our kids of the rules and expectations that we have of them, and still be validating and collaborative. So if they lied about something, let's say they lied about breaking curfew, right? Well, maybe reminding them, you know, we have curfew for a reason. Do we need to revisit the curfew? Do we need to revisit why it's there? Right? Because what I really don't want to do is have to make your curfew earlier, right? Or I don't feel like grounding you. So what do we need to do to nip this in the bud and treat it as more of a preventative thing, right? But the lying, I think the most basic piece of, I don't love this word, but piece of advice would be, don't ignore it, right? If we're ignoring it, it's sort of like being permissive of it, right? But there's ways to bring it up that, you know, we can let them know that we're aware of the lie and ask what we can do together to prevent that from having to happen again, right? If they feel like lying was the only option at that point, let's explore why.
Yeah. Terrific. Thank you so much. That's awesome.
No, thank you. Such good questions.
Oh, thank you, Emma Kate. So this is going to be our last call because it is 10:30. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to put your camera on and ask your question, or unmute yourself and ask your question, or send anything in the chat. I don't see any questions in the chat, Emma Kate,
Okay.
and I don't hear any questions. But we here at New Canaan Cares want to thank you. You're such a wealth of knowledge, and this has been a wonderful learning presentation. I hope for everyone on the call. Emma Kate, I guess before you sign off, can you give us one tip on how to keep our mental health healthy?
How to keep it. Oh gosh. Okay. At the risk of sounding corny, self-care, self-care, self-care. You, especially as the parent, I'm sure you guys hear it all the time, your mask first. It's so true. It's so valid, right? Often, especially when I'm doing family meetings, what I'm hearing from parents is how they're just being pulled in 10 different directions. And especially now with everything going on, it can feel like you're having to wear so many hats, right? You might be the task delegator and the parent and the tutor, right? Anything you can do to take something off of your plate or help sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Help outweigh, right, some of the stresses that you're dealing with is so key in helping maintain mental health. For some people, self-care is making sure that they're really getting good quality sleep, right? If you know that one of the first things to go when you get busy or when you get overwhelmed is sleep, we need to do some opposite action there, right? We need to look at making sure that you get that solid 7 or 8 hours or whatever it is that feels good for you. If you're someone who enjoys going for a walk, what do we need to do to try to incorporate 20 minutes of walking, right? Can that be the task that you give yourself for a week, right? Just to focus on what's something nice I can do for myself, right? And no cop-outs, right? Eating lunch is not self-care. Eating lunch is something you need to do. But something like going for a walk, listening to music, listening to that podcast you really like, taking a couple of minutes just to read a book for pleasure, you know, little things like that to give your mood and your brain a little bit of a break and not have to be activated, especially with everything going on right now. A little bit goes a long way. And if you just need to start with a little bit and then expand from there, go for it, right? But anything additional that you're doing starting today is already an improvement. Mm-hmm. And it's going to help you, you know, really, I mean, why we're here, right? We're talking about parenting and communication. If you're doing well, it's going to be a lot easier for you to regulate your emotions, for you to be collaborative, for you to be responsive and not feel like you have to multitask while your kid is coming to you with something, right? The putting your mask on first, as easy as I think it can be to dismiss it because there's so many things to do at once as a parent, it really is important, right? You're doing your best parenting when you're taking care of yourself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great. Kate gives you 2 thumbs up. Thanks, Kate. It's so nice to see your face. And thank you all again for joining us this morning. We are so happy that you are all here with us, and we hope you have a wonderful day today. And
of course, thank you guys so much. This was so nice. Any feedback you guys have for me, I welcome it. I love doing this sort of thing in the community, but I want to make sure I'm doing it well. So if you have any feedback for me, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Let me know.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Awesome.